Hey, what's up? My name is Jacob, and this is 80/20 Spirituality. Now, this video is going to be me explaining how the hell I got here, because I think you and I are wondering the same thing. And the funny thing in the spiritual path is that at some point down the line, you're asked to create, and create something that's unique to you. And so here I am, creating something that I feel like is unique to me, and at least a unique take, my take, on the world of spirituality, and why the name 80/20 came about, and the fucking weird stuff that happened on the way to this point. So, if you have a little bit of interest in that, stick around. I think I'll drop some gems for you. Um, but yeah, at one point, I was Mormon. Like, hardcore Mormon. Like, I never imagined myself being on the other side of it Mormon. And I never really wanted to be honest. So, my whole life, missionary, the whole nines. For those of you who don't know, a missionary is someone who is like a volunteer service member, basically, in your church, in the church, I should say. And yeah, that was like a dream that I had had for a long time, spreading the gospel. What else could be more important? I mean, spirituality, and this is still a belief that I have, underpins everything that we do in life. And on my mission, I saw that more than anyone, I think, where someone's faint beliefs or subtle beliefs on what they saw God as underpinned everything. I mean, it underpinned me going out and preaching what I felt like was the truth at that point in time. And at the same time, I saw the same thing with other people. They have their own beliefs. And that led to a fun and interesting time. I served my mission in Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of Southern Baptists and those types of Christians in that area. And I say those types of Christians, for those of you who aren't familiar, there are a bunch of different denominations in the Christian faith. There's Mormonism, even though all the other Christians don't think that that's real Christianity, which is a whole different topic. But more traditionally, there's Baptists, Protestants, Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecostals, born-agains, the list goes on. And the fun thing, at least for me, I thought it was fun, was I got to meet people from all of them, and at least a couple preachers from all of them. And as a result, get to debate what I was there for, was to spread this gospel and spread this message. And as I talked with more and more of them, I started to see they believed just as hardcorely about their beliefs as I did. And then it was like okay, whose belief is stronger? My God can beat up your God, even though technically we're worshiping the same God, just differently, I guess, you know? But it doesn't matter, because my thing is correct, so therefore you should listen to me. And they're like, no, my thing is correct, you should listen to me. Then you argue about it, right? And the funny thing about the Bible is that, at least in how it's interpreted right now, you can argue any point that you want and more or less be successful with it, unless you're talking to a Bible scholar who will actually show you what it believes in, or like what it actually says. Shout out to Dan McClellan. But outside of that, what does it actually say? You know, for born again, it might just be swear faith to Jesus and you're saved. To a Mormon, it's go through all of these different steps, these baptism, confirmation, going to the temple, being part of the community, those types of things. To a normal Baptist, could just be getting baptized. To a Seventh-day Adventist, same thing, except you don't have church on Sundays, you have it on Saturdays, right? And just stuff like that, right? And so I prided myself in understanding Mormon theology as best as I could, because to me it was the truth. And as I dove down that rabbit hole more and more, as is a common story amongst former Mormons, you run into like what I like to call the wall of faith, where you dive down deep enough that you start to see, oh, there's inaccuracies in this doctrine. There's different ways that it's been taught one way, and then it's been taught a totally different way. And if God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, how can that be true? Because this is such a fundamental point that you can't deny that, at least to me. And I'm not trying to make this I hate the Mormons and like that kind of thing. I definitely have my own opinions on them now, but it's not my intention. So I'm going to skip over all of the points that I found. You can very easily find them somewhere else. But what this led me to see, okay, so I had this revelation on my mission, I should say, and I ignored it because I'm a missionary. And now I'm in missionary leadership, meaning that I am working with other missionaries and making sure that they're doing good service and things like that. And so I continue down this path of denial and cognitive dissonance. Of like, okay, I will just lean on my faith and trust that it's okay, even though logically it doesn't make sense. I'm just going to lean on it anyway. And so I do that, and I finish my mission, and at the end of my mission I actually wanted to stay out longer because I felt I enjoyed it. I did watch people change. I watched people get their shit together. I watched people commit to things that they probably wouldn't have done otherwise. People break addictions. People find new community. People find a connection closer to God that they probably wouldn't have found otherwise, or at least gotten their first steps in that direction. And so to that end of it, I'm proud of it. When it comes to the actual doctrine, they continue to find that out on their own and find out what's true for them. But besides the point, I ended up moving to Utah because, it's the promised land, the holy land, the Mecca of Mormons. And this is about 2019 now. I have a so-so time, it's whatever. And then this leads me to COVID. I moved back to home, Arizona, and lo and behold, my family decides to get a divorce around that same time, about halfway through the pandemic. Partway through this pandemic too, I am realizing that my very regimented scripture study and theology and study and every blah, 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 right, all of that, I still feel God when I don't do it. And I feel like I'm shoving a square peg into a round hole deep, deep down. Even though I don't want to actually address that, that's just kind of how it felt. I was like, maybe that's just a faith thing, right? Maybe I just need to believe harder, all those kinds of things. But the divorce comes around and it makes me think, do I actually believe in this? Is this something I can rely on? Because the Mormons' claim to fame is that Joseph Smith was a prophet and that the church was restored through him, the Christian church, whatever that means to you. And through a successive line of prophets, it has stayed restored. And so if I was to believe in that, I had to actually reconcile my faith. And at this point in the story, like most former Mormons, you really start to see how much history has been whitewashed in the church and how much of it really does butt up against that faith. And to me, it was at a point where I had read around those topics, but not really like given it an honest criticism. And when I did, it crumbled almost immediately. And I was left with this deep, 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 deep depression. Everything I'd known in life was a lie, which is funny because I joked about it earlier in life. How crazy would that be? Foreshadowing, it happened, right? And so it's going to get dark, so just be aware of that, because spirituality is just as much about darkness as it is about light. So my first encounter with the dark night of the soul was this moment, and it led me into reconfiguring everything I believed in. I went into a very, very, very deep depression. Every single facet of my life, everything that I knew to be true, now had a question mark on it. Is this actually true? Is this actually something that I believe in? And again and again, it turned up as no, I don't. Or maybe it's just not exactly how I pictured it to be. But my justification for believing in a lot of this stuff was because I was told to. And so what do I think? What do I actually think, right? And that progressively led me into deeper and darker sadness until I got to a handful of times where I was very close to ending it, you know? And that first night, that first round, was very close. I was in a church parking lot, funny enough, because I thought it'd be ironic. And this feeling or this pull told me I needed to stay. And I had visions of my family and of other people I cared about. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm here still. And I continued down that path of just, what do I believe in? What do I actually believe in? Because I felt something that was undeniable to me. But the way it was described to me was not true. And in a lot of cases, in my opinion, manipulative. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, that's up for debate. So, as I continued down this path, it was this sadness of like, why would God betray me? Why would he line me up like this? Like, I was trying to be your most faithful servant. And I feel like I've been kicked to the curb. And so that led me into a very deep spiral, very deep shell of sadness. I moved out to this apartment that you see in the background here, because I was living with my parents when I moved back down to Arizona for COVID. And in this apartment, I fell into an even deeper depression, because now in my mind, the only way I could really reconcile how I felt was I needed to stop talking to most of the people that were still active in the church, because the one thing about the church is that they will do everything they can to keep you in it, because to them it's a salvation thing. And I understood that better than most. And so to spare them some torture, and myself as well, I just decided to nix it there. And in a lot of ways, whether vocalized or not, leaving the church is often seen as like leaving the church when you were a part of it, I should say, is seen as like a very bad negative. Not as intense as a Jehovah's Witness leaving, but definitely up there. And so I'm here by myself. I don't really know anyone, starting some new work, stuff I don't really care about, but it's like, hey, it'll pay for something, right? And I just get sadder and sadder and sadder. I start growing my hair out. I was never really allowed to growing up, and so I was like, I'll try that too. Get into smoking quite a bit, and that pushes me deeper into things, you know? For a long time, I just really wanted to forget. And as this path continues, I eventually reach a point where, you know, I've been in therapy for like a year, realized what I had was called religious trauma. And then from there, spirals into all sorts of other flavors of trauma, right? And just a side tangent on trauma. Our parents and the people that came before us didn't have a very big understanding of this either. This is still a fairly new area for all of us. And so I don't hold anything that they did against them. I try not to. Because trauma does get passed down, but it's from a misunderstanding. It's not from like a malicious intent more often than not. And so that's kind of my stance on that. But to continue on, I was in therapy for a while, felt like I hit a sticking point. And at this point in time too, considering myself pretty atheist. And like, because on my mission, I had gotten to a point where I was like, I can argue that Mormonism is correct, no matter which way that you slice it, when compared to another Christian religion. And if that's true, then that means either the Mormons or the Catholics that are correct in this. Everyone else I didn't see as correct. And I obviously ruled out the Catholics. And so I was like, well, I guess it's just the Mormons. If that's not Mormons, I'll be atheist. So here I was, actually atheist. and a year and a half into therapy, year and a half into therapy. And I was hitting a sticking point. Like, I was getting to points that were so deeply painful that I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to latch onto. There are so many voices in the space of spirituality and of religion that are more than happy to take a wayward soul. But which one is correct? Same question that Joseph Smith had, funny enough, right? And so this depression sinks harder and harder and harder and harder. And it gets to a point where I can't leave my bed. And I'm just in what's called like passive suicide. Or S-side, don't want to get that flagged. Maybe I'll just mute that. And it's hard to move. It's hard to do anything. It feels like you're crawling through hell with your shirt off. And it just sucks ass. Just to say, blatantly. I never really understood depression until I had to walk through it myself. And so I got to a point where I was like, well, either I'm just going to finish what I'm starting right now, or I got to find a different solution. And so the unlikely hero of the story kind of pops in. The YouTube comment sections, out of all things. And it was funny because I saw this video. I was watching some video, I don't remember what it was. And in the comment section, someone had mentioned about how mushrooms helped them with their depression. And everyone was upvoting it. Everyone commented on it. Got me looking. I was like, okay, well, I was so sad that I literally couldn't work. And I was like, well, I don't have any money for like a psychiatrist. So maybe this is something I can try. It's a little bit more affordable. And as I'm reading more, it's like fucking 70% success rate at least, right? And I'm like, whoa, okay, that's interesting. So I acquire some, and I try some. And it changed my life. It showed me that there was still love inside of me. And it showed me that that voice that I'd listened to this whole time was still there. It just needed to be stripped away of the dogma that can come with religion, to be genuinely heard. And from that point, it started my real journey into spirituality. I had lost my memory for a period of time just because it was painful to remember all the time that I'd spent in the church. It's come back now. And at that point in the story, that was probably 3 years ago now, 2.5, 3 years ago. It hasn't been an easy climb out, but working with that medicine has helped me heal genuinely and wholly. And has shown me something new. It has shown me that spirituality can take lots of different flavors and lots of different shapes. And that's what I hope to share here on this channel, is the 80-20 method with spirituality, which is 80% of the results of spirituality, meaning the parts that change and stay changed, come from 20% of the actions that we take generally in the spiritual community. Because in the spiritual community, or in as a religion as a whole, lists upon lists upon lists of different things that you need to do in order to be spiritual or holy. And while most of those are bullshit, to say the least, some of them actually work. And so what are those ones that actually work? And how do we actually apply them? And then if you happen to work with medicine as well, how do you combine the two together to get a truly deep and interesting result? Everything that I make is going to be assuming that you're not using any medicine. But if you are, reach out. I would love to talk. But that's the start of 80-20 spirituality and how I got here. Everything that I share is going to be talking about how we can repurpose things that we've learned in religion, things that we've learned in spirituality, into actionable steps to actually bring progress. And I mentioned one of them here at the beginning of the video, which is to create. And I'm thankful for the weird ass events that brought me here. And actually, you want a second lesson, a little bonus lesson for staying at the very end of this? Well, here it is. Synchronicities, a rightfully abused word that I don't really think is fully understood. So let's take angel numbers, for example, which people can attribute way more meaning than is needed. But then again, maybe they need it. That's kind of the thing with spirituality. There's a lot of dualism in it. We can get into that later. But for me, and for most people, when you see these angel numbers, it tends to mean, hey, you're following the right path. How do you know you're on the right path? Your head and your heart will tell you. That's how the Spirit of God communicates, and we call it intuition. So funny enough, as I've been trying to follow my intuition more, it has continually led me back to here, to creating and to sharing videos. And I had a friend, some of you might have heard of him, White Trash Willie, scooter dude, skate park, that kind of scene. And we were talking the other day, last night actually, and I was just impressed with, his understanding of spirituality and his depth and things like that. And his boldness in his own creation and in his own art, and just fully owning it, fully committing, and those types of things. And it really started stirring up my creative side that I feel like I had lost during this transition process of leaving the church. And it was great, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, cool, this is awesome. But then just like everything else in life, and it's so easy for all of us, I was just like, okay. And then I just went on with my day and didn't really do much about it, right? There was that feeling of like, oh, I could create, and my soul longs to create, it really does, but I'm not going to. Because what if someone judges me? And what if someone does this? And what if someone does that? And blah, 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 blah. Every creator that you've seen on the internet has probably had that same voice. And the creators that aren't on the internet have had the same voice too. It's the same voice that you have. The irony in all of this is that we're all basically the same person. And so for some of these people that have overcome that voice, it's inspiring to watch it, inspiring to see. And as I make this video, this is my attempt at overcoming that voice too. But at that time, I was like, okay, cool, come back home, fall asleep, blah, 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 wake up. I'm trying to do better at a morning routine, so I was going to go to the gym, which I hadn't really done. Just recent events had made it tricky too. That's an excuse, but I had fallen out of habit of it, which had been something that I had been part of for my whole life. And I was like, well, you know what? Instead of just kind of doing whatever in the morning, why don't I just try and hop into it instead of stressing about trying to get to it at the end of the day? So tired, groggy, didn't really want to do it. Was feeling just a different routine than what it was normally. And I was like, and so, yeah, I hop into it, and lo and behold, I get to the gym, I'm stretching, I'm chilling. Today was a recovery day for me, and someone says, hey, points at this hat, and I'm like, oh, what's up? Just random dude at the gym. Cool, good to meet you, right? Hey, you work with Hormozy, who's the guy who owns this brand? And I was like, no, I just like his content. I think it's interesting, and like I enjoy it, And he was like, oh, it's funny. Like we got into a conversation about his own community and transitioning into school, and which is this guy's company. There's a whole argument. There's a whole story there. But funny enough, another dude comes up, and same guy, I should say. He comes up, and just the idea that he came up and was just talking to me about this hat, and then we get into a conversation about building communities and creating content. And then his whole thing, right off the bat, he actually kind of reminded me of me, because I do this a lot too to people. Just like, hey, you've got a lot of potential in this area. Why don't you try and jump for it, right? And he said the same thing to me, which is not very often that I find someone that does that. And I was like, you're right. And there's a rule and like a scripture actually in the Mormon canon that I found pretty interesting and applicable here, which is out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall every word be brought to pass. There's my second witness. there's my second voice saying, hey, go and do this, go and create. So here I am. And then funny enough, right before I shot this video, someone had told me how they had a medicine journey over the weekend and how I came up in their journey, how they're thankful for me and enjoyed our conversations and things like that. And I was like, thank you, I deeply appreciate that. And it was another from the universe to, hey, get your ass in motion and create some content. Fight that voice just like the other great creators before you have fought it, and create. And I'm happy to be here. And this in of itself for me is like a spiritual experience, because it's been something that's been eating away at me for a long time. And it's funny, the path of spirituality is often full of things like this. That voice, that intuition, the spirit of God, whatever you want to call it, will always tell us what we need to do next. And then it's a matter of just sitting down and doing it. The support will be there. Everything will be there. It's just taking that step. When they talk about manifesting, that is what they mean, in my opinion, is following that voice. Once you have that vision in place, that voice will guide you into that vision. And more often than not, you'll be happiest and healthiest when you're leaning into that higher self. But yeah, that's my story. And that's how we got here to 80/20 spirituality. So what is a element of that 20%? Just in plain speak, one of those things is allowing yourself to sit in silence. There's a bunch of different ways that people do that: prayer, meditation, fasting, all these different things. They all lead to giving your brain an opportunity to percolate and bring things up to the conscious. And that includes that voice that will guide you. So, through the past couple days, through yesterday and today, that voice has told me to do this, and has told me to do this for a long time. So here I am. And so welcome to the journey. I'm going to document my process of finding these other 20%. I don't have all of them. And I don't have the capacity to learn everything to full mastery in this life. So we'll rely on the masters that have walked that path already and ask them the questions that we need to, as a community, find out what that 20% is, and hopefully make us all happier and healthier, and give us a platform to jump to when tradition fails us. My name is Jacob Taliani. Welcome to 80/20.